A Rockford abortion clinic provides more than 400 abortion pills. By pill, since it opened its doors 6 months ago. 23 News reporter Jake Pearson talks to the clinic's owner and a Right to Life member about their thoughts on the future of the facility.
Dr. Dennis Christensen opened the Rockford Family Planning Center in January, and out of the 403 pills provided, nearly half of the patients traveled from Wisconsin. More than a year since a Supreme Court decision that basically overturned Roe v. Wade. Some say the fight isn't over, with their focus on Illinois and Rockford.
Every abortion is such a human tragedy, and they don't have to happen. If we come together to love and care for each other, we can end abortion in Rockford.
Kevin Rylott is the director of the Rockford Family Initiative. He feels abortions shouldn't happen at all.
We believe that every child that has died because of this abortion clinic is a member of our human family. They're loved by God. They're children created in the image and likeness of God. And each one of them, they're not just a number, they're an individual person.
Dr. Dennis Christensen opened the Rockford Family Planning Center earlier this year. He disagrees with the Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. He says he thinks it's ridiculous to call those who cross state lines to legally receive an abortion in Illinois criminals.
Well, personally, I think it's nuts. I mean, they're just, why are they involved in this in the first place? You have some religious zealots. I am suspect of their real motivation. I just don't understand why they are involved.
He says no matter what the future holds, people will do what they need to do.
Back before abortion was legal, people were traveling out of the country to have their abortions. A
Wisconsin judge ruled this month that the state's law, which interpreted abortions as being off limits, may not apply to consensual abortions. The case is expected to appeal to the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Dr. Christensen plans to open a second Rockford Planning Center in the fall. The clinic will offer surgical procedures where the existing clinic will provide pill abortions.